Richard Jewell is an office boy in a law firm office in the United States. On his first day at work, Richard accidentally overheard a conversation with one of his bosses named Bryant, and from there, they both got to know each other. One day, Bryant was about to ask Richard to restock some things on his desk like tissues, papers, stamps, and many other things. But before being told, Richard had already prepared all the things that were requested even before the employees came to the office. He even filled Bryant's favorite snack in the drawer, which was almost run out of stock. Seeing Richard's hard work, Bryant was impressed. The next day during the coffee break, Bryant accidentally saw Richard playing a shooting game in the arcade machine. He approached and asked why would adults like Richard play a game for kids. Richard replied that his childhood dream was to join the police or law enforcement organization like the FBI, and said that one day if he continued to hone his skills, he would definitely be able to become one. Day by day, the friendship between the two of them grew bigger. Bryant was very satisfied with Richard's honesty and disciplined performance at work. One day before going home, Richard went to Bryant's office. He told him that that day was his last day working there because he had got a new job as a security guard at the university. Before leaving the office, Richard gave Bryant a farewell gift, which was his favorite snack. He was grateful because all the time he worked there, Bryant had become a good boss and considered him his best friend. Bryant then replied by handing him money while saying that if one day when Richard finally became successful, he had to keep his honesty and kindness like what he is right now. He said that because most of the time, the more successful you are, the more you lose yourself and became somebody else. Richard's days as a campus security guard were none to be different from what he was. He was always an honest and disciplined security guard. Sadly, his way of enforcing the campus's rules led him to be judged by the chancellor to be too excessive, making the students uncomfortable. Some students even reported him for sneaking into the dorm rooms, and that was not forgivable, even though his only purpose was to confiscate the alcohol that was forbidden to be consumed in the dormitory. Eventually, Richard was fired. In the afternoon, Richard met one of his friends. He was then advised to apply for a job as an officer at the American Olympics. In the next scene, in a news media agency office, a journalist named Kathy was seen upset because her boss was constantly driving her to find compelling news. A few days later, Richard finally got a new job as a security guard at the Olympics event. Before leaving for work, he said goodbye to his mother named Bobby. He also invited her to attend the Olympics opening ceremony in the evening. In the middle of the concert, a man named Tom, an FBI agent sent to guard the event, was seen. Not long after, Kathy, the journalist, came and talked to him. Turned out that the two of them already knew each other. Kathy's intention of coming there was to look for something to write as news, but she was disappointed because she couldn't find anything exciting there. Meanwhile, when Richard was on his duty, he saw someone carrying an oddly big backpack that triggered his suspicion. As usual, while his co-workers and even the police there were enjoying their time chatting and watching the concert, Richard maintained his discipline and swiftly followed the person. But when Richard managed to catch up with the suspicious person, it turned out that the bag was just filled with beverages. On the second day of the Olympics, Richard was late for work because of a stomach problem, but he still insisted on leaving, even though his mother kept forbidding him. Working all day and night made Richard look so tired that one of his co-workers told him to change shifts, but again he refused and wanted to keep doing his work. On the other side, the 911 emergency service suddenly got a call from an unknown caller, saying that a bomb has been installed in the middle of the Olympic venue and within 30 minutes, the bomb would explode. On the other hand, Richard, who was guarding the event, accidentally found a suspicious bag. Driven by his suspicion, he then asked the officers to check it, but the security officer underestimated his suspicion and said that the bag might just be an ordinary bag. Despite all the officers said, Richard still obeyed the security protocol. He insisted on asking them to contact the bomb disposal officer. Richard went to the broadcasting room and ordered everyone there to get away immediately because there was a suspicious bag found at the venue. They didn't believe what Richard said and said that they only wanted to obey the orders from the police, not from an ordinary security guard like him. When he came back downstairs, the bomb disposal officer had arrived, and finally, the bag was checked.
Biggest I've ever seen. We need to clear a 100-foot perimeter.
All right, we need to move. Right, back up. Everybody back. We've got a bomb! Get out right now! Evacuate the tower! We have a bomb! We got a bomb! You've got to go now!
Turned out, Richard's suspicion was correct. The officer said that it was the biggest bomb he has ever seen. While keeping everyone calm, Richard and all the security guards ordered everyone to move forward to keep them away from the bomb, but amid the panic, the bomb exploded and projectile-like nails were shot everywhere.
Move! There's a bomb!
The explosion caused chaos at the venue. Many people were hit by the nails, some even lost their lives and the rest were lightly or heavily injured. But, thanks to Richard, the casualties could be minimized. Fast forward hours later, in the morning, Richard was looking at the crime scene where the explosion took place. Suddenly, a reporter from one of the TV stations came and immediately interviewed him. The reporter said that Richard was considered a hero because he was the first person who managed to find the bomb and called the officers to help evacuate the residents last night so many lives were saved. Day by day, Richard's name was becoming more and more famous. Many calls came inviting him for interviews at various shows, even offering to write a biography. Every time he walked, people always praised and thanked him for his heroic actions. On the other hand, in the FBI headquarters, Tom looked stressed. He was scolded by his boss because of his klutziness. He missed such fatality and smeared the FBI's reputation. Such embarrassment was even covered in various TV news. The boss couldn't help but ordered him to find out who the culprit of yesterday's bombing was, no matter what, so that they could maintain their good reputation. In fact, they even suspected Richard to be the culprit. Tom and his colleagues then go to the campus where Richard used to work before. They received information about the mistakes that Richard had made that led him to get fired from his job as the campus security guard from the chancellor. Richard's bad track record in the past was collected to strengthen Tom's suspicions and to frame Richard for the bombing incident. All of this was done just to restore the FBI's reputation and to show how fast they could find the culprit of the crime. At home, before leaving for work, Richard called Bryant, his old boss when he worked as an office boy at the law firm office. He asked Bryant to be his lawyer because he never knew about the agreement for making the biography and other issues regarding the offer of cooperation. Hearing that, Bryant gladly helped him, but before hanging up the phone, he told him not to sign anything before he came. That night while drinking in a bar, Kathy met Tom. She knew for sure that by now, the FBI already suspected someone and was after the suspect of the previous bombing. That's why she asked him to tell her who was the person the FBI was after. He refused to tell her since he and his team hadn't found any strong evidence to support their suspicion. She teased him until finally, he unconsciously leaked the information that the FBI was suspecting Richard, the person that everyone thought was the hero. The next day at the office, Kathy immediately ordered her coworkers to write the big news about the bombing incident. The news included the suspicion of the bombing culprit, which is Richard, who was currently considered a hero of the incident. Shortly after, the news spread to the public and became a headline. Kathy was greeted with applause by the other staff for successfully raising their news channel rating. On the other hand, in the FBI headquarters, Tom's boss was furious when he found out that their suspicion was leaked to the public. His boss was sure that one of them must have leaked the information. Fearing that their suspicion was wrong and worsen their reputation even further, the boss immediately assigned Tom to interrogate Richard and then do anything needed to frame him so that their allegations can be proven to avoid embarrassment. They made up a story that Richard was the one who made and planted the bomb and then acted as a hero so that he could go viral and become famous. The following day, Tom and his colleagues came to Richard's mother's apartment to carry out the interrogation. Richard felt something fishy since the FBI was not allowed to interrogate or suspect someone if they haven't found any evidence of that person, so Tom explained that this was all just an exercise. After Richard left, the mother, who had just turned on the TV, was flabbergasted to find the news that her son had been accused of being the culprit of the bombing. Finding out about the news, she was devastated. Her son had fought hard to save the residents from the bombs and was known as a hero, but now he was instead accused of being a terrorist. During the interrogation process, something fishy was going on. Richard was told to string up the entire chronology of yesterday's bombing as if he was the culprit. They even made a statement letter and asked him to sign it. Lucky for him, he realized that the letter was a real one, instead of just a fake one for rehearsal purposes. He asked permission to contact his lawyer before continuing, but unfortunately, Bryant didn't pick up. Hours later, Bryant finally called back because it turned out that he had just arrived at the office. Richard told him about his current condition, and when he heard all the stories, Bryant immediately got angry and asked Richard to immediately avoid it to continue the interrogation process. He also told Richard to give Tom the phone. When Tom answered, he firmly said that this fake investigation was over. Unfortunately, Richard had already signed the letter from Tom because he was under constant pressure all that time. That night, Bryant came to Richard's place to make sure whether he was the culprit as alleged by the FBI or not. He wanted to clear everything between the two of them, and after talking for a long time, he finally believed that Richard was not the culprit and was willing to help him out of his distress. The next day, when Bryant visited Richard's mother's apartment again, he was surprised to find a large collection of weapons Richard had. Richard collected the guns just because he liked to use them for hunting in the forest. Seeing all the weapons, Bryant panicked. He thought that if the FBI found out all of this, their suspicions would be even greater. Unfortunately, not long after that, the FBI showed up at the front door and immediately rummaged the apartment for any evidence related to the bombing incident. In the middle of the search, one of the FBI agents confiscated Richard's mother's Tupperware. She didn't like it and immediately chased him out of the apartment.
Under things.
Over here, please. Bobby. Got some really dangerous pantyhose, apparently.
Bryant couldn't help but accompany her, who was panicking, leaving Richard alone with Tom and the other FBI agents. It turned out that they purposely lure Bryant and Richard's mother out so that they can persuade Richard to do something for them. They asked Richard to repeat the sentence that Tom said while being recorded. The sentence was the perfect copy of what the real culprit said when calling 911 before the explosion, saying that there is a bomb in Centennial Park and they had 30 minutes before it exploded. Tom just managed to get the evidence of Richard's recorded voice recording when suddenly Bryant came and kicked them out of there.
There is a bomb in Centennial Park. You have 30 minutes.
No.
He volunteered this.
Oh, bullshit. Man. Let's go, not
Client
today.
agreed to this.
I'm having all this shit excluded. You guys are full of shit.
Days passed and the news about Richard continued to spread all over the media. The reporters were always waiting in front of the apartment day and night, making him and his mother stressed out. Sometime later, Bryant took Richard to see a psychiatrist where Richard ran a test using a lie detector machine. After answering a few questions from the psychiatrist, they all waited for the test results, and when the test results came out, Richard was declared to be honest and passed the test, proving all the FBI's accusations were wrong. Richard and Bryant then went to the news agency where Kathy worked. They both asked her to revoke all the hoaxes about Richard's accusation. Bryant even cursed at her in front of everyone in the office while forcing her to immediately apologize for destroying Richard's and his mother's innocent life with the news she wrote without any evidence. The next day, Kathy thought about what Bryant said and tried to find the facts by matching what was told to her with the actual situation at the crime scene. She measured how far the location of the bag containing the bomb was from the public telephone used by the culprit to call 911. She was shocked when she realized that the distance between the 2 points was too far. The time gap from the witness testimony for the last time seeing Richard with the time of the bomb detonating is very close compared to the time spent traveling from the public telephone to the bag's location, which only meant that the caller was not Richard, and it also meant that Richard was not the culprit. Knowing all that brought guilt to her. It turned out that the news she's been writing all this time was a mistake. She didn't think that she had ruined Richard's family's life. When Kathy explained all these facts, Tom ignored it and continued his accusation to Richard about the bombing incident so that he can restore the FBI's reputation. A few days later, Bryant and Richard's mother were having a press conference. Bryant explained that all accusations of Richard so far were baseless. He brought the proof of Richard's test pass certificate using the lie detector, declaring his honesty based on the strict assessment of a psychiatrist. When Richard's mother spoke, she poured all her heart into it. She said that the FBI and all the media in front of them both had blindly accused her son and destroyed her family's reputation for the past 4 weeks. They were constantly surrounded by fear due to the constant surveillance of dozens of journalists and FBI agents. She cried and begged the president to do something directly to help solve this cruel case. In the corner of the room, Kathy was seen regretting all her actions that had destroyed Richard's family's life. The investigation day finally came. Today's investigation would determine whether Richard would become the suspect or be released from all the accusations. Before entering the room, Bryant told Richard not to say a word except to answer the questions that the FBI asked, and if he found it difficult to give an answer, then simply leave it to him. If Richard said something wrong, it is sure that the FBI would continue to corner him. Both of them then entered the investigation room and Richard got interrogated immediately. Tom asked a few questions and all Richard said to answer was no. They finally came to the last question. Tom emotionally asked if Richard cooperated with someone in the bombing incident, making him the only security guard leaving the crime scene harmlessly even though he was very close to the explosion. Hearing that, he flashbacked and remembered the vivid imagery of the incident inside his head. Instead of answering Tom's question, he emotionally asked Tom if he and the other FBI agents had found any evidence that could prove their accusations, saying that he was the culprit. Did they find Richard's fingerprints or footprints on the public telephone? Did they find explosives in his apartment or in his mother's Tupperware? Tom couldn't say anything. Richard then said that all this time, he always thought that the FBI was the pinnacle of law enforcement, but it turned out he was wrong. Despite managing to find the bomb and saved many people, he ended up being accused of terrorism. In the future, when someone finds a bomb, that person would definitely be scared to report it to the police because in this case, the person might end up becoming the second Richard and could be accused of terrorism too. Despite all the time and energy that the FBI used to frame him, which was not the culprit, they should have instead used it to find the real culprit, because maybe right now, he or she might be planning a bombing in another place. All he said slapped them so hard they couldn't say anything. Richard then went out of the office. 3 months later, when they were eating at a restaurant, Tom and his colleagues visited Richard and Bryant. He gave them a letter and immediately went away. Bryant then opened and read the contents of the letter in front of Richard, which turned out that the letter stated all accusations against Richard were not proven, and from now on, Richard was declared clean and free of all the accusations. Upon hearing that, Richard couldn't say anything but cried and thanked Bryant for always helping him all this time.
It's over. You won, it's over.
Hey,
You got it.
A few years have passed and now Richard had worked as a police officer. Bryant came to visit him and told him that the FBI had finally managed to arrest the real culprit. Starting from that day, Richard's reputation was completely clean. With a smile on his face, Bryant left his friend, the person who used to be his office boy, which now becomes to be a hero.